Hey, happy Monday afternoon. Dr. Alan Christensen here with you. Welcome to another version of Office Hours Live. Okay, good to be with you this afternoon. Let me just adjust the camera real quick here. And there we go. Okay. So, yeah, good to be back. If you've been here before, welcome back. If you're new, welcome as well. This is a discussion for individuals and for practitioners. We see a lot of both here. So I'm happy to talk about yourself, talk about cases that you're working with, either way. And main areas of focus are going to be metabolism, thyroid, endocrinology, stuff like that. I'm seeing a bunch of doctors coming on, a bunch of lay people coming on. So welcome. Hello back, and thank you for joining me. So with office hours, we'll take some of your questions and go in really good detail. And I also have a topic that I'll go through at the opening. This is something that's always relevant for you all, and it's got some updates in the news that I thought would be a good thing to share and talk through a little bit. Today's update for the opening will be about intermittent fasting. Tons of questions of that over the years, and another big study was just completed, and I wanted to share those results with you. That was a little tricky. So yeah, say hi. Let me know where you're from. I'm always curious about that. People jump in from all over the world. It's kind of fun to be aware of that and get a sense of who's where and time zones and whatnot. I'm back down in Arizona here for a little bit. I'm down visiting my son and our medical team here and hanging out. Our son just had a birthday and kind of a show and tell thing. So someone here from San Diego, I see. I'm just going to look where I can see more comments. So yeah, Brooklyn as well. Okay, Montreal. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm with you guys right now on Instagram, on YouTube, and on Facebook. Holly Avalon's there. Hey, good to see you, Holly. Hope you're doing great. I was just thinking about you, actually. Yeah, hope you're doing well. I'll get to where I can see the comments also. There we go. And we've got Joanne with us. Hey, Joanne, good to see you. Maryland, and we've got Linda from Texas, Jacqueline from Maine, many more coming on. Oh, Chanel from Cyprus and the Mediterranean. That's really cool. Kaylee from Michigan, Penny from Pennsylvania, another doctor with us from Atlanta. That's cool. Good to see you, Doc, as well. From Georgia. So all over, we got a good spread all over the place. So this is a cool thing though, but our son turned 19 and a lot of young guys like to go out and hang out with their friends. Like in Arizona, a lot of young guys will go down to Mexico and have a weekend for early party. It's a easy drive and they can cut loose a little more. And so that was an idea he had a while back. And we thought, well, I guess we won't be able to see you then if you're there with your friends. So that's okay. We'll miss you, but that's all right. And then he called me up a few months ago and said, hey, Dad, the Four Peaks area, and there's a traverse of covering all the Four Peaks, climbing and hiking like an all-day thing. And he said, I think we could break the speed record for that if you and I hiked and climbed and did vertical terrain quickly and efficiently. And he goes, that's what I want to do for my birthday. And it brought tears to my eyes. I was so happy. Like, yeah, yeah, you want to be with your old dad for your birthday. I'm getting a plane ticket right now and let's make it happen. So we did. I can share a picture here. This will show up on Facebook and YouTube. Well, I'll get it up afterwards for Instagram. But this was us, and we were up on. Oops, that's a wrong picture. This is the one. There we go. There was me and my son. We were on top of one of the peaks there, and this is probably about 6-7 hours into it. Yeah, it was hot out. We were at high elevation and lots of steep vertical terrain, less the climbing gear and all the sun garb. But it was an awesome day. It was 11 and a half hours all said and done, and we got back pretty wiped out. And it was a funny thing. I realized that people with addictions, right? So they get really, really high. They're euphoric for a while, and then everyday life just sucks for a long time, right? They go through withdrawal. And I realized so endurance athletes or outdoor athletes, it's kind of the opposite. You go through really painful, tough drudgery for a long, long time. And then afterwards, everyday life is euphoric. Like after this, sitting at home with my legs up, having a glass of ice water was the most amazing thing you could ever imagine. And it wouldn't have been that big of a deal without the last 12 hours of work. So it's kind of the opposite of a normal addiction. But yeah, that was fun. So I'm seeing a lot of comments coming in already, trying the wake therapy. We can talk about that. Uh, Let us know when our movie generally presenting. I don't get that one just yet. If you could clarify that further. But yeah, we'll cover some questions. So I want to talk a little bit about intermittent fasting. And this has been a popular thing. The idea has been that if we don't eat for a block of time, that will somehow help our metabolism. We'll tap into our fat stores, we'll break down old cells, we'll make our bodies work better. There's been these ideas about it, time restricted feeding, intermittent fasting, and a lot of it is plausible. But I always think a lot about just evidence and outcomes. Like what happens to people. It's difficult to base things too much off of ideas and models because they change. Not that long ago, there was a really plausible model about how eating more often would rev up your metabolism, make you burn weight faster. So you can make explanations for both sides of an argument. And so the question is, what happens to real people in real world settings? And ideally for longer periods of time. So a newer study came out, and this was looking at a group of people who had undergone a year of intermittent fasting. And it was a group that had been tracked pretty well. The interesting thing was they were this one wasn't really comparing the effect of intermittent fasting alone against a low calorie diet. It was more so comparing a low calorie intermittent fasting diet against, let me get the right one back here. There it is. Okay. It was comparing a low calorie diet by itself against a low calorie diet where there was also intermittent fasting. And the question has been, first was, does intermittent fasting make it to where you lose weight without eating less? And a lot of studies have shown that no, it doesn't, that if you eat less, you'll lose weight, but the fasting part alone doesn't work without the eating less part. That part's required as well. So this one wanted to see if there was some additional benefit. And so both groups were prescribed to be on a calorie restricted regime, and they were tracked for about a year. They looked at weight loss, they looked at cardiovascular risk markers, also fat loss, how much occurred, what areas. And they also looked at compliance or adherence. And I want to say out of the gate that something can be effective because it's easy to stick to. Even if the proposed mechanism isn't a valid mechanism, but if it's easier to stick to for people, that can be a valid thing. I saw Holly was on a moment ago, and there was a podcast I did not too long ago with, let me just take a look back here. Where was this? Yeah. Another gal with the same last name, Melanie Avalon. We did a podcast talking about intermittent fasting and behavioral aspects of that. And there was an argument, once the data showed that intermittent fasting didn't work better than eating less food, the argument came out that maybe it was more effective for some people, maybe easier to stick to. And that was plausible. So this one wanted to see if there was additional benefit to intermittent fasting when people were eating less over just eating less, and also to see if it was easier to stick to. And yeah, here was the study. This came out a few months ago, New England Journal of Medicine, and it was pretty good because it was a full 12 months. It was a year time frame, so it was a good time frame to see what was happening. And in this one, they were trying to really see if that low calories intermittent fasting diet was the same as a regular low calorie diet, and if not, what the compliance rates, if they were different. And here are some of the conclusions. So, and how it worked. During the 12 months, men were put to 1,500 to 1,800 calories, and women were at 12 to 1,500. Now, I've talked before about how calorie counting doesn't have to be a good way to go, even if the calorie model can be real. So for many people, it's just not an effective thing to count calories. No debates around that. But in this one, that was one of the models that was used. And what they saw was that over the 12 months, the rates of adherence were pretty much the same. So if people were told to count calories or told to count calories within a certain window, the window thing didn't make it easier. I'm sure if there wasn't the counting calorie part, just eating in a certain window by itself might be easier than counting calories. But those studies showed that it didn't work unless they were eating less food also. So this one was having them do both. And what they really saw was that the two regimes were basically the same as far as changes of body weight, also many other measures of health, and that the decreased food intake explained the benefits that they got. So the extent to which they lost weight was the extent to which they ate less food. And kind of interesting, those who lost the most weight, so over here, these were those who lost 15% more of their body weight. There was, and looking at those who lost greater than 10% of the body weight, it was pretty similar as well. Those who were on just simply lowering food intake, or those who are timing the food differently and lowering the food intake. So what they showed was that it wasn't more effective than simply eating less. In both cases, I really push for people not to try to live in a mode of weight loss. There's been this idea that a healthy diet should make you lose weight and keep on losing weight, and I've argued against that. I don't think that that's really true. I think weight loss is not easy, and it's something that's a stress for the body in best case scenarios. So what I've proposed has been the idea of making weight loss a short-term thing. So it's not months and months and years, it's a few weeks. You do it and you get done. And the benefit of that way is just that your body is not in this prolonged stress state. You don't push down the metabolism. And a hard part about lowering food intake is that there's a loss of lean body mass. Now, this study was interesting. They did prescribe protein shakes for both groups. They did recommend those for both groups, knowing that it's hard to get adequate protein to keep lean body mass with a lower food intake. And that's kind of what I've talked about with the metabolism reset diet. So intermittent fasting in this longest study now to date didn't show to be more effective than simply eating less food. But in both cases, I argue against the idea of going for long periods of time on restricting your food intake. I think it's unhealthy, it's stressful, and it slows your body down. I encourage a brief window of doing so. Do it in ways to make it go as well as possible, and then stop. Eat well, stay stable, and repeat if needed, but give yourself a break in between. And I was just wrapping this up, and I saw a really cool note that showed up on our Metabolism Reset Challenge Facebook group. And this one was saying, Carly just completed her first round end of May, down 13 pounds, kept it off. Did a second one in July. Took June and July off. Second one in August. Husband joined for the first round. Second round, she lost 12 pounds. So she's down, between the two of those, down 25 pounds. She wants to see 10 more come down. That shouldn't be a problem with a third, but it's worked out really well for her. And only thing, I've been struggling with hormone imbalance and a thyroid nodule. And after 3 years and many supplements and restricted diets, this was the only thing that worked for me. I'm so grateful for Dr. C. He helped my dad, my sister, my husband, and myself. My husband is down 18 pounds. And that's what's really possible. I believe that with basically taking narrow windows of time and doing a good job giving your body the right protein, the right nutrients, and adequate rest, not beating yourself up, not trying to work out too hard during the process, but being gentle and nourishing yourself, and then having times of breaks in between. I think that's a more effective approach for people. And I'm really glad that she had a good experience with that. So let me take a look at some of the comments coming in here. So again, I'd love your questions. The more detailed, the better. And if you put a question in, stick around. I'll probably have a follow-up question back for you, but I can give you even more personalized, specific guidance on that. Let's see. Joanne, it's so heartwarming when your adult kids want to hang out with you. Yeah, isn't that cool? I was really excited about that. It's funny. There's a cycle that we can go through of kids being embarrassed by us, then wanting to be around us again. And I was really happy that that's where we are. Let's see. Let me look at this one. This is with an Instagram comment. I was diagnosed with dysautonomia after the birth of my daughter. Symptoms of chronic fatigue syndrome are also part of what I've been experiencing. Can you share what you know about healing? Yeah, so great question. So dysautonomia, really, really broad blanket concept. And the upshot of that, you've got a doctor name. You probably know a lot of this, so forgive me, but many of you may not. The body has the autonomic nervous system, which controls the sympathetic and parasympathetic. So the sympathetic revs us up, gets us ready for danger or battle or struggle or famine. And the parasympathetic calms us down and lets us heal and repair. And we need some interplay of both, but many factors can make it to where we can't really shift modes when we should. The most common scenario is that major stressors or traumas, which could be physical stress, early life traumas, infectious type stressors, heightened loads of overactivity, sleep disturbances, you name it, but a high load of stressors can make us too easy to slip into that sympathetic mode and have a harder time getting out of it or turning it off. that can disrupt blood pressure, that can affect blood sugar, that can affect a whole lot of cognitive symptoms, and it can certainly affect energy levels. And as far as things about healing that, I'm just looking to see if there was more detail that you shared. Definitely not fasting more than 12 hours at this time has added more stress to my body. Yeah, so Dr. Katie Allen, in a lot of the medical literature, this is talked about as dysautonomia. There's also quite a bit of data about this that comes under the umbrella of hypothalamic pituitary adrenal dysfunction, or HPAD. And these terms are probably better expressions of what's been called adrenal fatigue in natural medicine. The adrenal fatigue idea misses the mark in that it thinks that the problem is that the adrenals are weakened. So that model goes something like this. It thinks that the adrenals make a lot of stress hormones and then they can't make any more. And in many cases, there are extremely low levels of stress hormones. But when we dig deep into the physiology, it's not because the body cannot make them. It's because the body is trying to give itself a break from them, or because the body can't switch back and forth out of those modes readily. But yeah, it's not for a lack of capacity, it's more for a lack of regulation. So the short version is that answering this question was the work that I put into the adrenal reset diet. And many of these factors are quite relevant to dysautonomia. Again, there's big overlap between that and HPAD. And that was the big focus of the adrenal reset. Some of the Cliff's notes of that are your body's autonomic nervous system is interwoven with your circadian rhythm, with your electrolyte balance, with your blood sugar regulation, with your control of hormones as well. And so the more you can dial in those factors, the less strain there is on the autonomic nervous system and the more it can repair itself. So in the book, I talk about how to really reset your circadian cycle, how to optimize blood sugar, how to help your cells uptake hormones properly, better regulation of electrolytes. But those are the big factors that allow for healing of that. And if you've got the book, jump on into that. The quickest way to use it is to use the quiz, which I think is chapter 4, I'm pretty sure. And the quiz then directs you to one of the following chapters that best suits your specific needs based on those results. If you don't have the book, you can go to adrenalquiz.com and take the quiz there online for free. It'll also give you a lot of guidance and advice that way. So yeah, check out the work around the adrenal reset diet for a lot of good head starts on dysautonomia. All right, good question. And let's grab a couple more here. Marilyn has one. I know you discussed high free T3 a week or so ago. My TSH is 5.8, free T3 is 5.9, free T4 1.3, test a week ago. All have been in this range for 18 months. Why is this happening? Any issues? So altogether, Marilyn, TSH is on the higher side. Now, the free T3 and free T4, they're not changing the interpretation of the TSH in these cases. It's very rare that they do. So when the TSH is above normal, we call that subclinical hypothyroidism until the T4 drops way below range. Then we call that overt hypothyroidism. So subclinical hypothyroidism. So some questions are, what can help that? What can cause that? And then the big one is, do medications play a role in that? So Marilyn, if you're on medications, then adjusting them may be of use. If you're not on medications, however, there's pretty strong data saying that it's not helpful to start them because of subclinical hypothyroidism. As far as things affect that, I think you've been around my discussions before, and I would guess you're doing some level of the thyroid reset diet. And there's been papers showing that that does reverse subclinical hypothyroidism for about 90% of people who do follow it. So if you have been following it for many months or more, the thought then is to check to see if there are some hidden sources of iodine. I don't know how far you've gone down the whole troubleshooting pathway or not, so I won't just blurt it all out. But yeah, no medications. Okay. So yeah, where you are, there wouldn't be a benefit to adding in medications. And if you have been on the thyroid reset diet, it'd be a good thing to measure iodine levels. If you are not on it yet, that would be the best starting place to look at all the hidden sources of that. I'll keep an eye out for clarification comments you want to add in and give better personalized responses to you. So yeah. Let me just jump back and forth and catch both of these. Let's see. Here's a great one. M. Frankie 1212. Does rhodiola need cofactors, vitamin C, B6, and B5 to work? There's a lot of overlap between how micronutrients work and adaptogens, and rhodiola is one that certainly has some effects on regulating cortisol metabolism. And the last formulation I used with it is the Adrenal Energy Blend through thyroid-specific formulations, and I do pair that with Thyroid Daily from thyroid-specific formulations, and that then covers the basis for all of those. To be really precise, B6, I do encourage the P5P form of B6 as opposed to pyridoxine HCl. So those are useful cofactors to go with it. There's not many cases to where B5 is actually lacking. It's something that's common in many food sources. So it's needed, but it's rarely the issue that it's going to be a problem if it's not added in because there's just so much of it around. It's quite abundant. But yes, those things do work together. And now, the other thing about office hours is that I love to shoot for follow-up questions. So questions that people put more detail on, or questions that are related to questions that are already up. That lets us go deeper and deeper and deeper into some given topic. And that's the fun part, I think, for all of us. A lot of the data that's readily available, a lot of you guys probably Googled it already, and I want to take you further than that. I want to take it to levels that you wouldn't necessarily find otherwise. So yeah, good one. Connie, my TSH is 3.9. Is that within normal range? This is a great question. And it is. The short answer is it is, but there's more to the story than that. So most labs call between 0.4 and 4.5 the normal range. And the TSH is backward. So the higher it is, the less hormone your thyroid is making. And if there's too low, it means there's too little hormone there. And this is true whether you're making it or taking it or some combination. Now, if someone is on medication, there's a lot of strong arguments to where the TSH can be better when it's on the low side of normal. So if someone's on medication, their TSH is consistently 3.9, they probably are getting too little. But the bigger question is, was the medication needed to begin with? And really, is it solving their core issues? And then those not yet on medication, that can be a sign the thyroid is slowing. That can be at a level to where it can cause some symptoms. But adding medication wouldn't help those symptoms. It's really more of a time then of nourishing the thyroid and helping it heal. And yeah, the thyroid reset diet, its details, the thyroid daily bundle nutrient pack, those be the better starting places. And there are troubleshooting steps for those who have done some of that. But papers have shown that upwards of 90% of people who do comply do see those scores go down. Some of the studies I've cited show roughly 70 to 80% rates of full disease reversal. But when you dig deep on that, those who didn't get better, a big chunk of them, they weren't playing. They weren't following all the guidelines. And another big chunk of them did improve, but they didn't improve all the way to goal within the time frame of the study. So yeah, most can see a really big change with those steps. And there's detail to those steps for sure, which are there in the books. But yeah, happy to talk through those things. The basic version is thinking about the extra sources of iodine that can be slowing down the thyroid. And along those lines, I saw a question I want to address here that kind of illustrates this point. This is from Sherry with us on Facebook. If a surgeon tells you to take Lugol's iodine before surgery to help thyroid surgery be better because it calms the thyroid down, why wouldn't you use it as part of a treatment plan even shorter term? Still trying natural methods, but not sure how long to. So Sherry, this is a really, really smart question, and it illustrates how non-intuitive this thing about the thyroid can be. So iodine doesn't so much calm the thyroid down, but it shuts the thyroid down. So here's the story. There's a pump, and the pump chooses how much iodine can come into the thyroid. In most cases, the amounts in the blood are a small fraction of what the thyroid would normally use. So the pump pulls it in against that gradient and it concentrates it. And this can be 50 to 100 times more concentrated than what's found in the bloodstream. But imagine if that pump went like all the time, even when there was a lot of iodine, what would happen? You get way too much. You would always have too much in your thyroid. So when you get a surge of iodine in your body, the pump shuts the whole thing down. It completely stops your thyroid, so your thyroid doesn't get damaged by the excess iodine. Now the problem is the pump isn't perfect for many people. It can't shut down a little bit every now and then or a little bit all the time. So what happens is if there's a chronic exposure to excess iodine, it's constantly slowing the thyroid and there's still inflammation occurring in the thyroid. And that's the connection of iodine and thyroid disease. Now, in some circumstances, that can be used intentionally. So if someone wants to have their thyroid stop for a period of a few weeks, you can give a massive dose of iodine. I actually just wrote a paper that you guys will see pretty quick about the use of iodine for preventing radiation sickness, like if you're exposed to radioactive fallout. So yeah, you can give a dose of iodine if you know exactly when the radioactive fallout is occurring, and you'll completely shut down the thyroid's absorption of iodine. I talked about this last week, I think, or week before, and the upshot of it is that it's not recommended for those with thyroid disease. It's not helpful unless the radiation is like within miles of your house or something. And yeah, it's almost never useful when you get down to the details of it. But Sherry, your question is so logical. But the reason they do that is because it stops your thyroid. It stops it for a period of a few weeks. So in normal everyday life, if you want your thyroid to heal, that's not what you would do. You wouldn't want it to stop. The problem is that it stopped. That's a problem by itself. But the other part of that is it doesn't always come back online properly. So if it's going to happen before the thyroid is taken out or when there's surgery being done by the thyroid, sometimes that risk is enough to be justified in those cases. So yeah. Okay, so related questions and follow-up questions. But that was a good one. That really helped us talk about a point that's relevant. Let's see. So here's from Spinder with us on YouTube. Started taking your supplements a month and a half ago. Thyroid, that's funny. So if I do this, then it can show up for everybody else. I can't see it very well. Started the thyroid reset diet in March. Knew it was going to be a long journey, having been diagnosed with hyperthyroid. Okay, no meds, but numbers from April, T4, T3, T2, and September. I got to put this out so I can see the numbers better myself. Let's see. So the T4 free was 1.9, and then it went down to 1.5, and T3 went from 4.7 to 4.2. Yeah, so Spinder, those are good changes. I'd be curious to know about your TSH levels. With hyperthyroidism, a lot of people have their TSH completely suppressed, like it's 0.001. And when you're hyperthyroid, it's possible that the numbers can improve, your T3 and T4 can improve before the TSH budges. So that's, I see your follow-up note. Yours is 0.01. So yes, those numbers do show you're improving. And if they come down further, we would eventually want to see your TSH start working upward. It does take treatment for hyperthyroidism in many cases in addition to diet. So please do follow any recommended guidelines you're receiving. In most cases, there are medications or natural compounds to slow the thyroid in addition. The hyperthyroid support, the thyroid daily bundle, they are good things as well, but you are making some positive progress that way. So that's excellent. And I'm just going to get the rest of your comments here. You mentioned that you had another one. There it is. No, where did it disappeared? Wasn't interested in losing weight, but lost 15 pounds starting the reset diet. So yeah, that's all positive. So good stuff. So follow-up related questions. I'll grab a couple. There's a lot of good ones coming in. So welcome you guys. Many are coming on here right now. Office Hours Live, Dr. Alan Christensen. Metabolism, health, diet, weight loss, thyroid disease. Those are the big things. And energy and weight are often the most pressing symptoms that we deal with. I find these are just like, weight and energy, number one and number two. And I think they represent some of the biggest things that affect our health in general as well. We had a doctor here talking about dysautonomia and about how she was affected by that. So that's the body's regulatory mechanism that controls energy and weight, along with thyroid function. So it also is a factor for long-term risk of a whole lot of chronic diseases. But when your body can do a good job at storing fuel and releasing fuel and regulating your fight or flight response, those two things, those are the most important that affect more facets of health than any other. Your immunity, your vascular risk, your pulmonary function, your liver function, your overall longevity rates. It's all well about how you can use fuel, how you can manage your stress response. Those two things are more central to health than any other factors. And that's why I've talked about the adrenal health as really how we manage our stress response, and metabolism reset, thyroid reset. These are how we use fuel. These are how our body manages itself energetically. But I think these are the most important topics that we have the greatest degree of control over. And yeah, besides, traumas like falling off a cliff or getting hit by a train or infectious disease, put that stuff aside. So all the non-communicable diseases, the things you can't catch from someone else or the things that don't happen from trauma, they're connected to one of those two things. They're tied to that in some way. So they're so central to everything. And that's why I love to go deep in them and make a big difference with them. Lots more good questions, you guys. Let me grab these here. Jerry, so this is a cool one. I have your resistant starch. I'm working on some gut issues, Candida H. pylori. Should I avoid the starch until issue is resolved? So, Jerry, this is a cool question. There's this idea that we want to that we help our intestinal tract by not putting anything in that can overstimulate certain organisms in the intestinal tract. And you've got to think about digesting compounds, digesting fibers, digesting different dietary elements, kind of like exercise. So if you got a bad back and you don't exercise, your back will feel better. It'll quit hurting, but your back won't get any stronger. So resistant starch, carbohydrate, legumes, these things are exercise to your bowel flora. And if you cut them all out, if you go on like a carnivore diet or something, for sure, you'll have a flat belly and lower rates of digestive symptoms. Totally get it. But that's laying down on the couch. That's not exercising. It doesn't mean you healed your back. It means you're not moving your back in any way. Now, you can't over-exercise. So you won't heal your back by going out and doing a 2-hour-long crazy workout when your back is sore. So you've got to pace that for sure. But it's exercise. And there's been some big studies on how resistant starch affects GI symptoms. And overall, it's not a common trigger of that. And it helps feed the good flora that protect you against things like H. pylori and Candida especially. There's so much data on that the more butyrate you have in your colon, the less apt you are to have Candida overgrowth. So yeah, RS won't be harmful for you in any way. If you've been low carbohydrate for a long time or taking a lot of antibiotics for a long time, you can't just take a ton of probiotics or take a lot of prebiotics all at once and have no symptoms. The amount that helps you might be an amount that causes some symptoms, but it's a matter of just pacing that. So yeah, good things for your intestinal flora are just like exercise. And a sore back might feel better when you lay down, but it'll heal when you exercise gently enough and regularly enough. And it's the same idea with feeding your intestinal flora. So yeah, great question. Let's get several more. Here's a great one from Jacqueline. Do you think someone with complete thyroid removal is better off taking Armour or Nature Thyroid as opposed to synthetic levothyroxine? Post-thyroid cancer surgery 18 years ago, massive hair loss lately. So Jacqueline, a lot of good questions wrapped up in those, and let's talk through them. Let's make sense out of those. So better off, I think about this in a lot of ways. If I had a magic wand, okay, and you had your thyroid taken out, well, if I had my magic wand, you'd get one grown back in that worked just fine. That's what I'd do and just call it good, right? Well, if I couldn't do that, the next thing would be to make something that you could take daily that was exactly like what your body made, that was plant-derived, that had perfect quality control, that was inexpensive, that was always available, that never had supply issues, right? That would be the ideal thing to have. And we've got to think about all those factors. I am a fan of natural thyroid. It's got a lot of merits to it, but there are considerations to think through in terms of availability. There have been problems with availability of products as of late. So T4 levothyroxine, there are many who do well with it. There's many that do much better on natural thyroid. But what I encourage for someone is to really, before needing to change categories of medications, think about dosages or amounts. For example, with T4, there's one called Tirosint. And if someone's on T4 and their thyroid levels across the board are pretty healthy, I wouldn't immediately think about that as being the biggest source of their problems or their symptoms, especially not hair loss. So too much or too little thyroid can totally be a factor for hair loss, but it's usually a factor when it's at the obvious extremes. So if your TSH is very high or very low, that could be a problem. And that's a problem on any medication. That's not a problem of the type of medication, that's a problem of the dose of medication. So if you're at stable levels already, I would think about possible other factors. If your levels aren't stable, if you take levothyroxine, you're bouncing up and down, or if you're on levothyroxine and your scores are good overall, but you can't keep them steady, then think about a better absorbed version. I'm a big fan of Tyrosint, which is a clean, pure, natural form of T4. And there's versions of it that are very well absorbed. You can even take them 15 minutes before a meal, which is easy for compliance. And there's really not issues with availability or quality control. I'm a big fan of that. Now, on the other hand, if you're on T4 and it's absorbing well, but you're always not low normal, hear me, not low normal, but well below range in T3, you could consider then including some version of T3. I would think about natural thyroid before adding in T3 as an isolate, but that's a consideration then. Now, hair loss, assuming your thyroid levels aren't just totally out of control off in some way, are often more commonly from other factors. And iron and cortisol are some of the ones I see the bigger drivers of that. And there can be multiple factors, but those are more common culprits. So yeah, there's some food for thought for you. And if there's more detailed follow-up questions, please post those and I'll look at those as well. Chris has a great one. Chris is with us on YouTube. TPO antibodies over 1300 critical. TAB, I'm guessing you mean thyroglobulin antibodies 6.3. What can one do to lower both of them? Yeah, Chris, you're on YouTube. If you plug in Alan Christensen and thyroid antibodies, you could spend, no joke, like a couple hours. I've got some really detailed webinar training for you. Here's the Cliff's Notes of that. So the easiest thing to do is lower your iodine intake and add in antibody support. I'll put a link for this too. So antibody support, there have been several clinical trials about using nutraceuticals to lower thyroid antibodies. And when I was writing the Thyroid Reset Diet, I was going through just all the clinical trials for all sorts of things on thyroid disease. And I saw these, and it made me nuts that there weren't any readily available products that had the ingredients that were there to lower thyroid antibodies. So I made this. And it's a pretty easy thing. It's 2 capsules once a day, and no big drawbacks, nothing really weird in that, and very effective. But that plus the Thyroid Reset Diet, most can see pretty substantial reductions in them. So easy thing to start with. So I've got a lot of great questions. Thank you guys for these. I'm gonna screen through a little more and see if I'm seeing some that are follow-up questions. I won't be able to get to every one, but there's some that relate to other questions. I'll grab on those. So Marilyn, we talked before, I will read your website regarding iodine testing. Yeah, Marilyn, specifically you're looking at your urinary iodine to creatinine ratio. And if it's really high, it means there's still some iodine sneaking in from somewhere, or you need more time on lowering the iodine. So take a look at that. If you're not on the Thyroid Daily Bundle already, do include that. If you do have elevated antibodies, the antibody support can be useful as well for those purposes. Okay, so follow-up questions. Here's a great one. I thought I saw a follow-up one about, I love how you explain everything, so helpful. You're welcome, for sure. Well, here's a great one too. And I almost touched on this. Can you address if a thyroid supplement that contains 75 micrograms of 3,5'T2 is helpful for those not on any medications? Has T2 supplementation been studied in humans? Patricia, this is a phenomenal question. So T2 is an active thyroid hormone. It is naturally occurring in desiccated thyroid, and people who have their own healthy thyroid function do make it, and it does circulate. Has its supplementation been tested on humans? It has. And the context of it with natural thyroid suggests that it may be of benefit for metabolism. In isolation, the problem is that it doesn't lower the TSH, and there's no way we can measure T2. There have been studies in humans, and they have shown that high amounts of it I'm not totally sure if these were human studies or pre-human animal studies, but the upshot of them is they showed that if you do take T2 in isolated form, you may see no changes in other thyroid markers, but you can see some of the heart problems you would get from too much thyroid hormone. So it can cause hyperthyroid side effects. And I dug for a long time looking at T2. There are some intriguing things about it. And I was considering using that as a supplement as well, because when used in the context of natural thyroid, yeah, you can make a case for it being beneficial for basal metabolic rate, for overall metabolism, for fertility purposes, for cognitive function. It does a lot of really good things. And I've considered it as a complement for T4 therapy or even T4 and T3 therapy for those not on natural thyroid. But the more I got into it, I found that there was no way you could really know how a dose of it was working if it was taken by itself. And there was no available data on how much you get in natural thyroid. So in the context of natural thyroid, I think it's useful to have T2. But as far as taking it by itself, there's no data saying how much is good or how much is safe, or how you would check to see if you're getting the right amount. So I don't recommend it. It has been used by bodybuilders, by those trying to crank down their body fat, and there have been those case reports of harm from it. So I don't recommend for it. Let's see. Boy, lots of good questions, you guys. Sorry for my pause. I'm just kind of picking and choosing. When testing thyroid, do you recommend AM blood work and NP thyroid after a blood draw? My numbers, they're off when changing from Levo to NP thyroid. Yeah, so Travel Queen, great question. 5 things to think about for testing your thyroid. That's totally one of them. If you do test in the hours after taking thyroid medicine, you'll get goofy numbers if you're testing something that's in your medicine. So the most common scenario is people take T4, like Synthroid, and they'll do a blood test soon afterwards. Now, T4 absorbs slowly enough to where it may not change their T4 much, if any, but T3 absorbs a little bit faster. So if you're on something like NP thyroid, which has T3, and you measure T3, even anywhere from 1 to 12 hours afterwards, your T3 might look really high, like much higher than it means. So the ranges that are given on the blood tests, with medications, we have a peak and a trough. There's the high point after you take it, there's the low point before you take it. So the ranges in the blood test for thyroid tests, they're trough readings. So they're meant to be interpreted before someone has taken their day's dose of medicine, not afterward. So yeah, before will give you much more meaningful numbers. That's 1 of 5. You also want to get them in the morning. The same, your body has a circadian rhythm with thyroid hormones. And the numbers we use are based upon morning levels, so 6 to 9. You also want to get them fasting. So before food changes that. You want to get them after having had a break of 3 or more days from your supplements. Biotin, probiotics, a lot of things can change your thyroid levels. Even if they don't change them in your body, they can change them in the test tube. So yeah, you got to have a break of 3 days from your supplements. The last one is think about your menstrual cycle, the last of the 5 rules. If you check your thyroid mid-cycle, you'll get a very different reading and it's not as accurate. So you want to get it the first 9 days, so your period to 9 days afterward, or your last 9 days. So like day 19, day 20 to day 28. So your last 8 days. Yeah. First week, last week of the cycle, not mid-cycle. Those 5 rules will give you much more consistent, meaningful thyroid tests. Lots of good questions. Okay, I want to get this one here. Liz is asking, can you talk about the approach of a naturopath doc versus conventional endocrinologist for treating Hashimoto's? Well, yeah, so great question. And I can answer that in a lot of different ways. I can answer that, what are the common naturopathic approaches, or I can talk about what I would consider the best approaches. And I'll just talk about that one, right? This is not what everyone does, but this is what I would argue you should do. So conventional medicine, and there's a range. People do different things in all professions, but most conventional doctors, with Hashimoto's, meaning the antibodies, the immune portion of it, they don't address that side of that. They may offer medications, but in most cases, they do reserve those only until the thyroid has slowed down badly. So there's generally no treatment given for the thyroid antibodies, the Hashimoto side of it. In the natural medicine world, the common approaches are gluten-free diets. What else is commonly done? That's the biggest single one. Anti-inflammatory diets are often recommended. And those are not bad things per se, but they just miss the mark. They're just not where the evidence shows. So we have many clinical trials now showing that for one study, 2 people with Hashimoto's, And they had TSH scores of averaging 14.1. Many had TSH scores in the 200 range, and they had very high positive thyroid antibodies. For 3 months, they followed what's written up in the Thyroid Reset Diet, and 78.3% of them completely reversed their thyroid disease. They totally got back to normal. Now, of those who did get back to normal, one big chunk of them wasn't compliant, so you got to play to win, right? But another big chunk of them weren't normal yet, but they were heading that way. They were radically improved. So in the study, 95% of people completely normalized or radically improved if they followed the guidelines. And I've seen that pretty consistently. So yeah, the antibodies, I really encourage the Thyroid Reset Diet and then antibody support as an option for nutraceuticals to speed that along. So that's my approach. And if someone wishes to be gluten-free, or if they have celiac and they should be, totally fine. But there's just not data showing that that's a helpful step. So I want people to do what works the best. Here's a great one from Anita. I just finished listening to the Thyroid Reset Diet book. Anita, thank you for that. I read the audio version of it, as you would well know by now, which was such an eye-opener. Thank you. Do you have any fertility advice for someone with Hashimoto's? Boy, fertility advice, nothing too differently from that. There is data, however, though, saying that having Hashimoto's, there's two facets of that that can affect fertility. One of which is the total level of thyroid antibodies. The other is the TSH if it's far too high. So if the TSH is well over 2. Now, for general health, for someone who says, hey, like someone who wrote in before that said, my TSH is 5 and I'm tired, I have hair loss, I have weight problems, I'm concerned about my disease risks. There's no evidence saying that someone like that would benefit by thyroid medications. It just wouldn't help them. But if the TSH is always way over 2, that can affect fertility. Now, for most people, they can lower that with diet only. However, if someone has followed those guidelines and it hasn't lowered, then medications can improve fertility for the TSH scores. Medications don't help fertility when the thyroid antibodies are elevated, however. So to lower the antibodies, again, the diet is the best approach. Antibody support is a blend that's safe prior to conception, but not to be taken during pregnancy. But those two things can help fertility. And in many cases, they can also regulate the TSH if it is off. Here's some positive feedback. What is a fantastic book? Best first thing to do if antibodies are high. I think you're agreeing with my statement because I think that's the best. I think diet is the best way to go. I think it's very ideal to focus on simple diet and lifestyle changes when they are evidence-based and effective. Let's see, lots more good ones coming up here. Any others that are related? Wow, Marcella Williams doing the Cell Core Protocol alone with your protein shake, melatonin, and easy iron. The Cell Core Protocol has iodine tablets, but I'm afraid to take them. What's your input, please? Well, if you guys don't mind, I'll be quick. I don't know what that is, but I should be able to find out pretty fast, right? So Cell Core Protocol, because I'm curious, if it's got iodine tablets, why would it? Cell Core Gut Detox Protocol. All right. So, yeah, this is a gut detox protocol. There's no reason iodine would be helpful with that, unless there's a whole different cell core protocol that you're referring to. But I'm seeing this one talked about quite a bit. I can't see the exact products and ingredients right away. I don't want to take too much time about that. Well, protocol. Nope, everyone's is different. Drainage lymph support. KL support. So, yeah, I don't get it. I know. I wouldn't. No, there's the drawback is that supplemental iodine. I see. Excellent metals and parasites. Yeah. So iodine is something that does kill some bad bugs. It is an antiseptic for sure, and that's why it was used on the skin for quite some time. But internally, it's not effective as an antiseptic at all. which is why it's not used that way in medicine. The same way that we don't take bleach or hydrogen peroxide. They kill bad bugs by the generation of free radicals. And that's why things like that can be used on the skin sometimes. Iodine absorbs, that's a drawback about it, but peroxide doesn't absorb, doesn't work the same ways. So they can be used topically sometimes, but internally they're not used as antimicrobials because they're such strong sources of free radicals. And their harm to the thyroid is much greater than their benefit as antimicrobials. They're much more broad spectrum than antibiotics, regular antibiotics are. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend iodine tablets as part of a gut health protocol. Not at all. Okay. I think I'm going to wrap that up. There's a lot of great ones here. Chris has a quick one. Selenium and B vites are high. Yeah, a lot of testing for nutrients is not accurate. I don't put a lot of weight into those. I'm also not a fan of the megadoses of nutrients. Chris, if you look at my Thyroid Daily, for example, I put the amounts we need in the course of a day because you take it each day. I don't put massive amounts that are above that because things can bioaccumulate. I just looked at the Thyroid Reset Diet book. Is it only for hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's? That and for hyperthyroidism, it can be a good adjunct as well. And I read and did the MRD in May. Do you also recommend doing the Thyroid Reset Diet and ARD, like circulating the diets? If so, what frequency or do you recommend? Don't have a thyroid, like to lose 10 pounds, was about to do the MRD again. Yeah, Jacqueline, where you are, look at the Thyroid Reset Diet. Be aware of some of the big outlying sources of iodine and just keep them, the red light foods, keep them out of your life. They can make your body not do as well with your medication. Not having a thyroid, you'll need medication, but megadose iodine can block that, make it not work as well. So be aware of those. If the big goal is weight loss, the MRD is the way to go. So pick up that cycle again. And as far as maintenance ideas, look at the maintenance guidelines in the MRD and apply those using the green and yellow light foods in the Thyroid Reset Diet to keep things stable with thyroid function. So yeah. Oh, Tamara, making a thyroid-friendly green powder, do you think they're necessary? Good question, Tamara. I have mixed feelings about them, and I think you asked before, and I saw that and didn't quite get to it. You asked before about, I'm looking back to see if I can see that. Someone asked before about oxalates and green foods, and overall, I've written about oxalates in some detail. Here you go. Are green powders better than raw greens for people with thyroid issues? Are oxalates bad for thyroid? Oxalates are not a concern is a short version of that. If you Google my name and oxalates, I've explained that in just exhaustive detail. We make almost all the oxalates in circulation ourselves. There are also in our foods, but what we eat of them doesn't change the oxalates that are in our blood or in our urine. It's not tied to dietary intake. So yeah, there's rare genetic cases where people have too much oxalates in their body, but it's not because they ate them. So green foods are good. They don't have to be raw. Cooked is as good as well. We don't have to have buckets of greens to be healthy. Servings of a cup a couple times a day can make a huge difference. So green foods powder, I wouldn't say never, but so far I think that the difficulty that I have, I don't use green foods powders. The problem is that the volume you get is just not in the ballpark of what you get from foods. So if you want to, for example, I made the Thyroid Daily to make up for micronutrients, and the amounts in that are great. They're adequate. They're therapeutic. The amount of spinach that helps us is an amount that we would get like in a salad. And the powders always talk about concentrating this or that. We don't know what we have to concentrate. The active ingredient in spinach is spinach, and that's true for greens in general. So the powders to me are probably better than nothing, but not by a whole lot because they're just so small. Even like a scoop of them is not the same as a salad or a serving of veggies. So yeah, I'm a bigger fan for those cases of just throwing the veggies in. And if you don't, I don't know that it makes a difference to add in a few powders. I think you're better off just making it work with the veggies. All right. Dr. C with you guys. Have a great rest of your evening, and I'll be back with you same time, same place, but different location. And take great care. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.